if you're falling asleep really easily. So people say, I'm a great sleeper. Like, this is not the conversation for me. I can fall asleep anywhere. That's actually a big red flag for us that either they're dealing with sleep deprivation commonly, or they might have an undiagnosed or untreated sleep disorder. And so that's part of the reason why they're able to fall asleep with such ease, because on average, we're looking for a sleep latency number of around this range, but anywhere from 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes or so. So it should take a little bit of time to transition from an awake state to a sleep state. So if you're doing that immediately, that's another indicator.
That's delightfully counterintuitive.
It's so counterintuitive. I know, right? And so that's something for us to be aware of. But so we want to just have a little bit of time, not arduous, not hours to fall asleep either. So there's the Goldilocks here. But certainly we want to be mindful of a few of these things, these red flags that pop up. And then we can also look at, is there a sense of some of the subjective things?
Mollie, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I'm excited too. I feel like the entire publication history of the Augmented Life has been like people from wide variety of different walks of life telling me I need to pay more attention to sleep.
Love it. I love those people.
Yeah, right? So
but sometimes we need to hear it a few times, you know?
Yeah, the Scott Kelly, famed astronaut, also literally wrote a book about like all of the weird places in which he slept.
Amazing! I have not read that. I think I need to add that to my list.
Oh, it's delightful. And I just we just had on the Augmented Life this woman with like breakthrough skincare. We're talking about what she has done in delivery systems to deliver peptides like deeper into your skin in order to be useful. And, I'm here for it. I'm loving this science. Katie Aston is, walking me through all of this, and it gets really complex. So then later I'm like, okay, so I'm just a regular guy and I'm mostly buying like face lotion at the pharmacy. Like, what should I be doing to optimize for my skin health? And she says, get better sleep.
Yes. I love this woman. Okay. I need to check out her line. That's incredible and so important.
Oh, you should. Nocturnal skincare, right? There's definitely some overlap.
Yes. I've acted as the sleep advisor for Nobel Panacea, which is a company that has a product around what they're calling their chronobiology approach to skincare. So how to drip mindfully throughout the course of the night, utilizing the fact that we have very different skin. Our skin is acting in a different way throughout the course of the day and into the night. And certainly, yes. So sleep, chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology, our circadian rhythms. There's so much there that's getting but more recently getting a lot of attention and press, and how it can ripple into many aspects of our lives, and often surprising aspects of our life. So our experience of life, our mood, our ability to read others, our pain tolerance. I mean, just the spidering into many aspects of life are often surprising, including the skin. So yeah, the list is endless.
Right. So I feel like my entire life has been enriched through a single strategy of finding people who are obsessed with a thing, and then just following their obsession. Right. It's just you can learn so much. Tell us how this became yours. What got you into sleep?
Well, I love that you use the word obsessed, because my newsletter I've been sending for over 6 years every Monday is called Sleep Obsessions. And it really mimics, or mirrors the obsession that I have had, for better or for worse. So I do want to point to that too, because part of what got me into this field was a period of my life where, as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, stressed to the max, I went through this time of, while traveling internationally, adding jet lag into already kind of maladaptive sleep habits. And suddenly I went through this period of insomnia, which completely changed the course of my life. But during that period, I became really obsessed with sleep in the ways that we probably don't want to be cultivating, meaning that I was so fixated on it and I was developing sleep anxiety, which is this whole category where now we're almost scared around our sleep. Are we going to be able to get sleep tonight? Like there would be times when the sun would be setting and my heart would start racing of I can't face another night. How am I going to get through the night? Oh my gosh, just the fear. And we do find a lot of people when they're dealing particularly with insomnia or other sleep disorders that they might start getting a lot of stress, kind of tethered to that experience. And so that was where it started for me. And yet now on the bright side, on the after all kinds of, iterations and a lot shifted throughout that process of finding what works to actually get that sleep not only restored, because I'd always thought of myself as a series of labels with sleep, bad sleeper, short sleeper, night owl, in my genes, sleep when I'm dead, all these sort of isms. And so I've never really related to my sleep in an empowering way. And yet, as I started to dive into this world, it just completely changed the course of my life because not only was I able to restore it to where it'd been, but actually get into this conversation of optimization. So that grew into this obsession in a more kind of empowered place of, oh, wow, sleep. I truly believe is a skill and we can build this muscle no matter where you're at. For the listener, if they think of themselves as a good sleeper, not so great sleeper, doesn't matter. We can absolutely take things to the next level. But ultimately, so that obsession came from once getting to the point of having an experience of I feel like I have no control or ability to sleep, then shifting through all those stages to actually restore that workability. The sense of empowerment was so great and my experience of life so dramatically shifted that that's where that obsession really was born.
I think that that journey of skill development, where in any aspect of life that's semi controllable, you go from it happening to you to
Yeah.
being a thing that you are in charge of, you're
Yes.
steering your own ship, is it's like, it's what it's all about.
It is what it's all about. Yes, that sense of, kind of progress, that sense of especially when sometimes we're, down and out, we're kind of at that rock bottom moment, and that was a rock bottom moment for me. It felt as there was fears of, "Am I stuck like this?" And often we can get into that catastrophic thinking of, like, "Is this my life now?" And at different points, I went to the doctors in different locations, my husband and I had been together for 14 years, and this was kind of in the beginning of our relationship. And we went to the doctors in Croatia, Budapest, all Italy, all these different places, and would leave with sleeping pills in each location. And it was like, is this the path that I'm now on? Am I going to be dependent on these things? And it just felt very scary really and a helpless sense of am I stuck like this. And so to shifting over to that, I really want to leave the listener with, even if they aren't experiencing it to this degree, or maybe they are, but that there is this whole world available as we start to support optimizing sleep. And there's yet to be a single person that I have worked with, and I've worked with thousands of individuals. And we have a very large database of Oura Ring users. So we get to see measurably what their numbers look like. And there's yet to be a person that we can't support in up leveling in some way, shape, or form. And so that's what we can certainly get into today.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, let's talk first, let's say, about instrumentation. The first time I tried to instrument my sleep, it wasn't with any fancy technology.
Yeah.
Um, so instead, all I was doing was tracking two data points. One was how many hours did I sleep, and and then subjectively, I just made my own 5-point scale. How easy did I find it to wake up? Okay.
Mm,
And
love
what I
it.
found is no correlation whatsoever. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would almost like leap out of bed with 4 hours of sleep and be like, I am ready to go. And other times I get 8.5 hours and I'm like, I'm going to need 3 cups of coffee this morning.
Yes. I see it all the time. Yes. Well, and I think you're even pointing to something really important too, because there are many aspects of sleep that we want to look at to see a whole complete, kind
Right.
of aspect of this puzzle. And to your point, if we just look at a few markers, we might be missing the whole story. So certainly, and it's not to discount that sleep quantity, so the amount of hours you're logging certainly are important. If
Right.
someone comes in and saying, "Oh, I'm only sleeping, 2 hours or something," that would be preposterous if we would not be addressing that. So, of course, that's very crucial. But we also want to know a few other things. We want to know consistency is a huge one. And even in recent years, we've seen some really important and groundbreaking studies pointing to some of the importance of sleep consistency. And so, when we look at if you're kind of deciding at different points, should I sleep in longer? Or should I get up at my consistent time? Some of these studies seem to point to that you might want to look at that consistency piece. So, that consistent wake up time being so crucial. So, what time are you falling asleep and waking up? Then we also want to know about wake ups. And so, the number of wake ups and the length of time that you are awake throughout the course of the night.
Mhm.
And then we also want to understand some of the aspects of how your body is responding throughout that course of that night as well. So, what type of sleep staging are we getting into? Which that does get a little layered, especially with wearables. It's not certainly their strong point. But we can also get into some other aspects of things like what can reflect a bit about our nervous system. And that's an area that some of these wearables are really intriguing as far as it relates to heart rate variability, your respiratory rate, your body temperature. Some of them are pulling blood oxygen, although it's not the best marker with a lot of them. So we can get a sense, though, of how relaxed are you able to get throughout the course of the night. And that can be important to giving a window into your ability to get that richer sleep. And then we want to also make sure, are we dealing or stepping over any sleep disorders? And there are over 100 sleep wake disorders, and many people, unclear of the people listening right now, whole swath of them listening have sleep disorders just statistically, and yet they're likely undiagnosed or untreated. And it's a big problem. And if people are listening and assuming that, oh, well, my doctor would have likely caught that if there are red flags. Unfortunately, the average doctor, even out of Harvard Med, is getting about 2 hours of training in sleep. So they're not so likely to be able to spot these things, not from a malicious place or anything, but from a place of just they haven't gotten that proper training.
Right, right. I've found for my own part that once I changed my mindset to think about sleeping as my body's restorative prep mode to be a badass the next day,
I love that.
th- then part of doing a good job is helping my body prep. Part of being a good manager is helping, those that you're managing to be their best. So why not apply that to my own body that I'm driving around?
Yes.
Right. So then it wasn't a question of do I work hard or let myself sleep? Rather, I was seeing them as supporting each other. And, just that little attitudinal shift really helped. But then, of course,
Totally.
I also got obsessed with like trying to figure out the source of this noise. Like, why, why do, why does my length of sleep not necessarily correspond to, these feelings of being well rested
Sure.
or being ready to wake up? And that I think started my own obsession with adding more instrumentation around factors that could be influencing sleep, but
Yeah.
sort of hidden. Um, that ultimately led to like the place where we're at today with Volcra, where we're bringing in blood glucose monitors and exercise tracking and other lifestyle factors,
Yes.
all happening before the sleep. So then you can see the patterns that otherwise are really, really hard to spot. But I get ahead of myself. Let's just talk actually like the data that can be drawn from wearables just
Yeah.
about, sleep quality. Um,
Sure.
I think anyone who's experimented with these variables, with these wearables, is seeing, a host of parameters, HRV, estimate of sleep phase, estimate of wake ups in the night. But then also, I think everyone who tries to do this gives you a score. You've looked at this entire field. What number should we trust? Which ones seem like they're hokum?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love everything you just said in there too, and I love that you alluded to some of these other things that we can certainly touch on around blood glucose management and measurement systems that kind of previously people might not have initially connected as far as right, like would
Yeah.
I right if I'm struggling with my sleep or I'm having wake ups throughout the course of the night or having trouble falling asleep, people don't automatically go, oh well, maybe I could get a continuous glucose monitor or some of these other aspects that we certainly encourage people to bring in. And in some of our programs, we just have bundled in that they're automatically using so that we can get to the source of this, including blood work, including mold tests, toxin tests, environmental tests, allergens. There's a whole slew of things that could be surprisingly showing up in our sleep results that we might not have at first glance considered. So, love that. But then as it relates to tracking, so I'll say that most of the tracking that we're doing nowadays with our the people that we work with is largely with the Oura Ring. We do have some users with Whoop, but we certainly have worked with other trackers as well. So BioStrap, Garmin, some more brain-based ones, some Muse, Dream. Years ago, Zio. There's so many that you can play with. But I would say with something like Oura Ring, which is what we spend a lot of our time with, especially it does give us a great sense of the breadth of data that we can pull as compared to like a single night in a sleep lab or even some of the at home sleep testing, which we do also have people start there as well, bare minimum. So, with that, we have them use things like sleep image ring. So, that will use different, HRV tracking and right. And so, can also be diagnostic to see if there are anything from especially a respiratory based issues. And then if there are signs that something else might be at play, then we do have more advanced, even at home testings that are kind of nice in between, like a Venn diagram of how it used to be just like go in lab or bust. Now we have more options even at home that can also even diagnose things that we couldn't diagnose at home before, like periodic limb movement disorder, restless leg movement disorders, and additional sleep challenges that might show up in other aspects of the body beyond just like on the from the markers of respiratory, et cetera. So with Oura Ring, what we're looking at are this whole kind of battery of indicators of what could be impacting people's sleep. But we are mindful to make sure that people know that those sleep stage classifications are some of the least accurate pieces of data on many of these wearables, and that even relates to in lab and a PSG. There's still agreement around mid 80s% of the time, so around 85 or so percent of the time, even if you go in lab, there's still kind of points of contention there, let alone when you go on consumer grade tech. So for all those people that are making really like actual decisions about how to manage their life around what they're seeing for their deep sleep and their REM, et cetera, we really want to help pull that back in. And then instead of looking at that master score, we want to for sure parse out what's underneath that so that there's much more awareness and less of this kind of flawed way of looking at sleep, because we really should not be thinking that we need to get this certain perfect amount of sleep every single night and that it should look in this particular way night after night. And it, just makes a lot of sense for a lot of athletes. They'll see this because they know on sort of their training days that the body will go after a different type of sleep versus their recovery days, because now there's not as much of a need in certain areas for even just like that physiological recovering. So to think that we're static and that we should have the exact same amount, oh, we're going to get 25% here, 20% here, et cetera, every single night, that doesn't work with what we know about both our psychological recovery and our physiological recovery. So for example, we'll see people that maybe they lose a loved one or something, and it's very psychologically taxing, then we do tend to see changes in some of the structures of their sleep, and what points to an uptick in from their baseline of REM, which is almost like our inner therapist. So the body needing to go after that, as opposed to someone who just ran a marathon, and then we might see upticks in the need to repair the body. And so with that, then they might be going after more deep sleep, but there's going to be a dynamic ebb and flow to that. So to just look at that sleep score, I think can sometimes be problematic for people.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense to me. I've also tried to think about laying down my data as not even an opportunity to like judge my performance every morning. Like, ooh, how'd I
Yes.
do? Like, I'm gonna
Right.
grade
Performance
myself.
anxiety comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Right. I'm imagining a future self. I'm imagining myself like 20 years from now going, how was I sleeping back in my 40s?
Yeah.
It's like we're laying down the baseline for that
Yes.
future. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and it's funny you said that too, because that's one advancement that we're hearing rumblings that is in the works, which is determining your sleep age. So
Ooh,
people might be familiar with determining you're testing for your biological versus chronological sleep
right.
age or your age. Now, sleep age would be one in which, say, you're 30 years old, and then you're sleeping like a 47-year-old. That would be indicative of more fragmented sleep. So we tend to see that older sleep patterns tend to have more fragmentation. There's certain changes that can also come up with the timing, with the can come up with the quantity, other kind of key markers. So AI is something that is starting to be brought in to analyze sleep results so that we can start to get that sleep age. And if we see signs that people's sleep is starting to maybe deteriorate younger and look more reflective of an older sleep age, then we can be in action or celebrate if you're sleeping, you're in your 40s and you're sleeping like 20-year-olds. Hooray.
Nice. Okay. So let's say I have either an undiagnosed sleep disorder or or maybe I'm just perfectly fine. But I want to lean into good instrumentation to help my future self.
Yeah,
Um, there's I can adopt a wearable. Let's just say, okay, I put on the Aura ring. It's nice and easy to wear, so it's nice
sure.
to have on a lot, which is good. What other instrumentation should I be adopting now that like one could form a diagnostic aid to maybe raise my awareness of a problem I didn't even know I had, or two, just to help in the future when I face some sleep disorder, have a basis of comparison. Like, this is what I look like when I was healthy. What kind of test should I run out and buy, or what should I apply to my environment, to my body, to give myself, let's call it, a sleep 360.
I love that. Okay. So a few things. One, having that baseline in the background. So it's been wonderful working with people with, say, whether Aura, Whoop, whatever you're using, over years of time, just that breadth of data that we're able to pull from. And then when we make fundamental changes, we can see such a clear deviation. And to your point, we can say, okay, point to this is how it was before, and this is how it was after we had that kind of intervention.
Mhm.
So, one, you're tracking that in the background as your baseline. Two, I'm certainly biased, but I want to see a future where every single person is tested not just once, but multiple times throughout their life, to be screening for these sleep disorders. Because even if someone listening is like, oh, well, I tested for that, 10 years ago and it was fine, you can develop sleep disorders years, later, and we want to be aware of this. So that's why we'd like to start bringing those in. What do those look like? Well, you can get from lots of different sources online now. A couple that we tend to work with. One is Lofta, so you can get really affordably. Another is Empower Sleep, and they do a great job of. They're trying to be like the Uber of sleep, if you will. And so that's setting that sleep image ring that I was mentioning to you. And so we're testing for those disorders, and part of the red flags to be tested. I mean, I know I already shared that I want everyone testing, but if you need more of that kind of the set of reasons, some of the things that we see as red flags on these trackers that might indicate that something's up is one, if I see lots of ticks throughout the entire course of the night of lots of wake ups, even if the person doesn't remember them, which I hear a lot too. But if we're seeing a lot of those throughout the course of the night, that's a bit of a red flag. If we see a lot of movement throughout the course of the night, another red flag for whether it's sleep apnea, upper airway resistance syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, restless leg, etc. Um, then if we're falling, this is a surprising one for a lot of people. If you're falling asleep really easily, so people say, "I'm a great sleeper. Like this is not the conversation for me. I can fall asleep anywhere." That's actually a big red flag for us that either they're dealing with sleep deprivation commonly,
Oh, right.
or they might have an undiagnosed or untreated sleep disorder. And so that's part of the reason why they're able to fall asleep with such ease. Because on average, we're looking for a sleep latency number of around this range, but anywhere from 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes or so. So it should take a little bit of time to transition from an awake state to a sleep state. So if you're doing that immediately, that's another indicator.
That's delightfully counterintuitive.
It's
Whoa.
so counterintuitive. I
Yeah.
know, right? And so that's something for us to be aware of. And sometimes you get ticks on some of the wearables if you do have a very short latency, and people be very confused by that. Like, isn't that a good thing? But so we want to just have a little bit of time, not arduous, not hours to fall asleep either. So there's the Goldilocks here. But certainly we want to be mindful of a few of these things, these red flags that pop up. And then we can also look at, is there a sense of some of the subjective things that you mentioned, like when you wake up and you're just feeling, if you're feeling particularly tired throughout the course of the day, if you are dealing with morning headaches, if there's any reports of snoring, definitely want to get that checked out for sure. Teeth grinding, other signs and indicators. But getting that sleep test done. And so those pieces of tech, I do foresee us getting those even more embedded into our technology in the future. I mean, there's already some like Withings has a sleep pad that's coming out or soon to be available so that people can sleep on that to test for sleep apnea. Apple just released their kind of upgrades to their watch so that it can kind of give signs if there's a sleep apnea detected. And so all of these things are going to be important pieces of tech. You can also do things like Snore Lab is an app that you can just download and
Mhm.
put next to you, and then get a kind of a score that will come out each morning and do that for multiple nights because snoring and apneas, et cetera, are dynamic. So, you might have lower severity on one night, crazy severity on another night based on certain things you're doing or positions, et cetera. Then I think on the position front, there's going to be and will continue to be more advancements in sleep positioning therapies because we know that gravity is very helpful for supporting or obstructing airway. So, as you kind of lay back, it makes a lot of sense that just naturally your tongue can fall backwards, especially if it's lax or certain anatomical issues, and that can obstruct the airway. If there's anything going on with the nose, which there's some really cool advancements, which I actually got to benefit from something called Vivair recently, which overnight brought down my respiratory rate by about 1.3 breaths per minute when I
What?
had already
That's
been
huge.
optimizing a lot for years and
Wow.
years. And I'm talking this was just like a month ago. So this was pretty amazing. So Vivair uses radio frequency to reshape the inside of your nasal passageways. So in about 20 minutes, it reshaped a slight deviated septum that I had overnight. It was amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yes, exactly. And I also at the same time, so this is convoluted because there's two factors, but
Uh,
and sorry for this tangent. I know I'm telling you a million things. So so then at the same time, I also got a tongue tie release as well. So these are two big things that can really impact sleep. And so we anticipate that this will be another kind of tangential piece of tech that we'll start to see more of. So when you go into a dentist's office and get an actual 360, so you get the 360 scan, that we can start to understand more of what's obstructing the airway, including things like tongue ties, which I had. And so as we release that, it allows for proper tongue posture. So that improves my airway and anyone that gets that done. as well as that ability to breathe. And so to have those changes overnight and included an uptick in HRV, and I see a lot of changes, but rarely do you see like overnight that dramatically of a change, especially if you're already optimizing, because usually it's like very small kind of shifts. So all that to say that what I want to underscore is that there are a lot of things that we can bring in from a tech perspective, but there are also some surprising things I think that people might not realize, like the tongue light, like the nose. That can make such a huge difference. And then, of course, I know before we hit record, we were talking about other pieces of tech like cooling mattress toppers, things in our environment, air purifiers. I'm kind of getting to other aspects of technology. But there's a lot there from a advancement perspective that we can bring in.
Right. Well, speaking of surprises and let's say room tech, uh, a surprise of my life, I'll highlight two that I never noticed until I brought other time series into my analysis. Um, and air quality definitely affects my sleep.
Totally.
Which like the correlation was always there,
Yeah.
and you can buy consumer air monitoring devices like Aware, and there's a time
Yes.
series there. It's just it's usually siloed, and you're not seeing it next to your sleep data to see the correlations. So like once I did, it wasn't even advanced data science. You just look at them at the same time, and you're like, oh, look at that. Same thing with noise. So I didn't even realize this, but my Apple Watch produces a time series, it's kind of hidden in there, of background noise levels measured in dBm, and once I was viewing them at the same time, with my software company's own product, right? So I'm just looking at this, and but it's a coincidence. Like none of us designed this on purpose. We just had the sound and the sleep next to each other, and I was like, oh my gosh, background noise in night. Like, of course that's affecting my sleep. But
Yes.
but I didn't know, because what would happen is noises would happen that would lift me out of sleep, but they happened while I was asleep, right? So I wasn't, unless it was a continuous noise, I didn't know that that's what woke me up.
And did we know what the source of that noise
Oh,
was?
well, okay, I'm gonna get in trouble. I was,
Ah,
yeah, okay. So my wife's snoring.
yes. That's what I see a lot. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, totally. Okay. And what's happening for her with that? Is she in the process of testing, or did she test, or?
It's a position. It's 100% a position thing. So,
Mm,
yeah, she shifts onto her back and starts snoring, and just kind of needs to reshift on, and reassume a side sleeping position, and it goes away.
okay, real quick, just for anyone else that's listening, because I hear this all the time. Actually, our most popular podcast was actually with someone that's, it's not like some crazy following or something, but it was a expert in couples and sleep, and so she wrote the book Sharing the Covers. Dr. Wendy Truxell. If you want to have another guest to go in deeper on this, sharing the covers piece that includes like kids, dogs, whatever,
Mhm.
cats, all the things. And one of the things that was pointed to was that just how much, if we have a sleep disorder or snoring, have, of course, that can impact our sleep, but then can impact the person next to us, because the body doesn't like especially inconsistent sounds, or sounds that aren't kind of have like a clear pattern or flat background, like a white noise, just
Right.
predictable, safe, understandable. This kind of like alerting system goes off when we have those sharp spikes. So what I would say for that is, one, like you said, the positional piece is huge. We actually had the inventors of Smart Nora on the podcast recently. If you've seen that pillow, it's a smart pillow that for years they've been kind of the first people in the game to adjust, your positioning. It would censor when there was snoring happening and then change the positioning. Now, 8 Sleep on their base does have the ability, when it senses snoring, to kind of elevate, go up, down, and that changing of positioning can be helpful. But I'd also say that myofunctional therapy can be some things that are surprising. It can sound like I don't know, woo or what, or like a light intervention, but can really create a measurable change in the amount of snoring that occurs, from strengthening up the tongue muscles and in the shape of the mouth and the jaw and placement of the tongue, etc. And there's even other pieces of tech, because I know you were talking about tech before, asking about that. So another interesting one is called Excite OSA, and that one's also approved for snoring and mild sleep apnea.
Hmm.
And so this one is FDA cleared. And what's really interesting about this is it's the only daytime treatment for snoring and apnea. Um, yeah, so it's really cool. So for about 20 minutes a day, my husband uses this. So he can be like playing video games or doing emails or whatever, and just has this weird contraption in his mouth. And so it's strengthening up, acting as like a TENS unit for the tongue, strengthens,
Wow.
yeah, the muscles in the tongue, and then it measurably can help reduce the severity of both apnea and snoring. So that's a really fascinating one. Also, oral appliances can really make a difference. Those exercises that I was pointing to, if there is anything blocking or anything blocking the nose, there's things like intake breathing, which uses magnets on the nose to expand the nose if any of that's at play. So if anyone's listening and it's like, oh, I've just resigned to the fact that my whatever husband snores, I snore, do know that there are so many things we can do.
Wow. Okay. That I have one more follow up here, which
Yes,
is
totally.
so the having helped so many people, it what are the most common overlooked environmental factors? What's making me ask
Yes.
is you had just mentioned like the possibility of, maybe mold in the air, something like that. And I'm thinking, how would I know? Right.
Yeah.
What are the most commonly overlooked environmental factors that people should be like assessing when they're looking at the actual environment in which they're sleeping that might be affecting them?
So and not to be like so obvious because people of course know about colds and quiet and dark commonly. But I will say that there's something in the subjective take of when people say, "Oh yeah, those parts are covered," but then when we, come in or we have them take pictures or videos, then commonly what they think is cool, dark and quiet isn't quite cool, dark and quiet. So just to hit on those real quick, out of the Sleep Foundation, the suggestion for the temperature range in your bedroom for ideal sleep, or ideal range for getting into those deep levels of sleep is between 60 to 67 degrees. And for a lot of people, that is surprising because they think they're in a cool environment, but they might not be anywhere near some of those numbers.
Right.
And for some people, even if they are in that 67, if we creep them back to lower degrees, so say whatever, 63 or something, then often we can really improve some of the quality of that sleep. So just playing with that temperature and working that up over time. We're not trying to make you wildly uncomfortable or something, but it's surprising and just being a little cooler than you might imagine can really have some benefits. And then of course paired with I mentioned the cooling mattress toppers, but not trying to like kind of overarch or not trying to kind of overemphasize, but it just makes such a big difference. And you can think about why this might be from an ancestral perspective of the fact that our understanding is that for thousands of years, we likely slept on the ground, which would have been the coolest place in our environment. And yet, that's how it was first, and that's how we evolved. And now we're sleeping in such foreign environments with foam mattresses covered with, thick, heavy duvets, and we're cooking in that environment and, 98.6 degrees or whatever in there underneath all of that weight. And so overnight, it makes a lot of sense that then we would have these subsequent wake ups as we start getting hotter and hotter in there. So if we can be mindful and impact the temperature in the bed and in the ambient environment. So we're hitting
Mhm.
both of those. That's a big one. And then for darkness, I hear a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, it's dark, it's fine." Or I wear eye mask, it's not an issue. But we want to know that also there are photoreceptors in the skin. Now, with much more research around the eyes and the impact there, but it does still appear to impact the quality of our sleep and even surprising things like blood glucose levels following days if
Wow.
you're in an environment that has even low level of lux there. So what that means is we want to at least be able to pass the hand test where you can't see your hand in front of your face when you're in bed. And if you can still see that hand, we really want to take continued action to,
Hmm.
and even if it's not like super pretty looking, there's been times when we will travel and we'll have like black garbage bags or whatever just to like, get the job done. So we want it really, really dark in there. But then to your point, we can get more nuance. Of course, the sound piece and like the doing the detective work that you did. So Snore Lab will pick that up too, and you can play back some of those, kind of big sharp spikes in noise. So that's helpful. And some other trackers can also do similar things. So figure that part out. But then, yes, the air quality, huge. And you can even on Amazon for pretty affordably get some air quality testers, and then certainly you can get more advanced ones. But then do want to ideally, for most people, at least in the bedroom area, invest in a high quality purifier, even just for the kind of off gassing, if you will, of one or two or more individuals in a closed environment, because that can kind of shift the dynamics there. So the air purifier can be helpful there. You can test for if you suspect mold in your environment. There's things like, Got Mold is a company just with a fun tagline if you need to remember it, but there's certainly others that can help you with the testing process. And then I would also say if there's air quality issues at play, so depending on where you live, this can be a bigger issue for some people than others. So I've clients like in LA, for example, or what have you, or different places that might deal with more difficulty with their air quality. So being mindful of that, and then we might want to do different things or bring in more purifiers or other
Right.
strategies when that's the case. And then, though, we do often test for mold within the body and looking at other aspects. So, and that's a little bit more layered of a conversation.
Yeah, but I like that idea of just adding basically a battery of blood and even microbiome tests to just try to like get a handle on your environment.
Totally. And one last piece on the environment. So if you're making major choices, say like on to move into a location or building a house or what have you, it could make sense to invest in a skilled and trained and certified building biologist to come in. So we had a building biologist come into our space. Ryan Blazer with Test My Home. And so we interviewed him in the whole process, and he's on the board for the Building Biology Institute. And so lots of information comes out of these trained individuals, and they'll come in with lots of tests that they can run. And so they'll also test, and this can get a little controversial, but I will say that they can measurably test for different levels of EMFs, magnetism in different areas, and what have you. But the EMF piece is certainly clear. We know even for fertility that we don't want to have large amounts of EMF for fertility concerns, and certainly microwaves and what have you nearby. If so, if your bedroom's like on the other side of the kitchen or what have you, and the refrigerator or things that have large outputs, it can just make sense to just kind of do a little one over and make sure you're not dealing with surprising sources like Wi-Fi routers or what have you. Um, so all those things, just to kind of do your due diligence, make a lot of sense. But that can also go into things like even VOCs in your environment, formaldehyde, what
Right.
have you. So say if you're in a brand new place and you're like, oh, there's no chance of mold. Well, it might be that the paint that was just used might have some off gassing for a period of time.
Right.
New
Right.
mattresses can have that. And if anyone's listening and like, oh my God, I got to be afraid of everything, don't worry. It doesn't have to be so arduous, but that's where the building biologist can help support this topic.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised to just thinking this through that um, the even if EMFs are not per se bioactive, they're probably correlated with ultrasound, right? Like certainly some, you often can hear your Wi-Fi router just because of the oscillation of the radio equipment, and why wouldn't that have a subconscious effect? Like if right, like it is literally vibrating tiny little hairs in your eardrum, which might be affecting you in a way that you're not conscious of.
Totally. And there are studies that we can point to about, so some of the theories are around impacts on melatonin production and sustained melatonin throughout the course of the night. And I will say a lot of these are often outside the US, but are some in the US. So definitely a dicey topic, but if you wanna err on the side of caution, especially since you're not using, presumably, some of these things while you're sleeping for those 7,
Right.
8, 9 hours,
Right.
then can we just, kinda minimize some of those? So and that would also include things like our phone and not having those charging right next to our head and other kind
That
of
definitely
sensitive.
bothers me. That whine of
Yes,
charging, I just cannot have
right.
that near my head.
Can't have it. Yes, and then it's probably good, kind of, mental health hygiene to not have these very addictive things right near us, it makes a lot of kinda sound sense.
So I'm realizing for the first time, thinking this through in the context of your list, that as you engineer your sleep environment for darkness, you could very likely accidentally be minimizing air exchange, right? So you need to
Exactly,
work on
right?
these two at the
Oh.
same time.
Totally. I
Yeah,
know. That's the right. So it's one of those things where that's where if you have it available for you, say if you're in the process of building your new home, if you can consult from the ground up a building biologist so they can help
right,
you think of all of this so that we can make sure there's proper ventilation. We can have certain settings in your environment to be able to get out, even from cooking. That can be a big off-gassing area and,
right.
impact,
Oh yes.
so that that's properly ventilated so you're not dealing with that throughout the course of the day and then into your sleep. There's all kinds of things that if we think about this from the beginning, then we can help support. But if you're someone that's just, renting or moving into a place temporarily or whatever, there certainly are workarounds, but you do have to kind of think this through. But once you get this thought out and kind of handled, then it's settled. And now you've got this kind of sleep oasis, hopefully set up. That's our goal.
Yes. Ah,
Yes.
the sleep oasis is indeed
Yes.
my goal as well.
Right? Totally. I know. And probably people listening, I mean, it's very common that even, kind of great sleep optimizers still have that one thing in their bedroom that's like annoying. It's still that light that's, shining. Can we just take that one action to cover that up with some like red tape that you can get on Amazon for like 10 bucks? Can we still, can we shift over the light bulbs that are still using the old school or not even old school, the very bright blue kind of toned lights? Can we shift that over to red or amber? Can we just take a couple of these actions and so then over time we have this kind of optimal setting for ourselves?
Exactly, right. I think with complex engineering tasks such as this, you can almost be overwhelmed by the number of variables that you can
Yes.
tweak, and so it's important to just pick a thing you can do right now. Just change one thing.
Yes, just start with one. Yeah, one action. And half the time these things are pretty affordable. I know I was mentioning some of the more expensive things with the cooling mattress covers or whatever, but a lot of these are like, a $10 light bulb here, like those little you can even use electrical black tape to cover the glowing things. I've used like thumbtacks to cover some of the curtains in a particular way so that the one like, glowing piece isn't happening. So we kind of fix that. Just taking those steps to audit your environment
Right.
can really go a long way.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds magnificent. Let me promise you, I am going to be like doing some jaw and tongue muscle training to improve my sleep. That sounds absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to report back.
Yes, okay, so with that and I have no affiliation with, Snore Lab, but we did have the creator on the podcast, and one of their sister apps is called Snore Gym, and Snore
Cool.
Gym
I love it.
is right? What a great name, and Snore Gym also one, if you need, like, the kinda buy-in, which, I mean, I'm someone that often needs that, they do point to different pieces of research as to the efficacy of some of these interventions because they can look a little weird, so you're kind of like, working out your tongue, working out your jaw, et cetera, mewing, and some of these other things that people might have heard of. But then it will point to the measurable changes that we see for people in not only lowering snoring, but lowering the severity of sleep apnea. So an actual, disorder disease. So that's a big deal that we can have some of those interventions. And commonly for some of these disorders or things that we might be dealing with, it's a multifaceted approach. So it might be these exercises, it might be positional sleep therapies, it might be oral appliances. For some people, maybe CPAP, but for other people, the Excite OSA that I was speaking to, there's a lot out there now.
Well, you've given us so much to follow up on, so much to take a look at. How do we keep track of you and your work and get in touch with you.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. And thanks again so much for having me. A few things. So, one, my mission on the planet is to help support as many people as possible with their sleep. I know how just helpless and, confusing and mystifying it can be when you truly feel like, did I lose the ability to sleep, or what is going on, or why am I so tired, or all those different things that can show up. So with that, we do put out a lot of free content for people. So one, we have that weekly sleep obsessions newsletter, goes out every Monday, never miss a Monday, respond to every single email. It does take me some time, but we'll respond to every single email. So that's the newsletter. Then we have a sleep podcast. So the Sleep is a Skill podcast, where we have almost 200 episodes with tons of experts in the area of sleep and sleep optimization. So that's all free. Lots of content on social media as well. But all of this you can get at sleepisaskill.com. And then if you are struggling or you want further, support, we have cohorts. So our next one is launching in the new year, new you, new sleep, all that good stuff. So what is really cool with that is that we have everyone wearing an Oura ring throughout that process. So the whole group, we're able to see kind of like the visual of how the group is progressing in all these different aspects, which is really fun. And so in 8 weeks, we really then can go out to ensure that we have some real measurable changes for people not with their sleep, not just like a nice idea or whatever. And so that's with the cohort. Then we have one-on-ones and sleep wearable audits. So we can audit your wearable data and then help support the, kind of thoughtful interventions as well. But all at sleepisaskill.com.
Fabulous. Mollie Eastman, thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I so appreciate your kind of just interest in sleep, the things that you've been doing, the things that you stand for. Just is fantastic. We need more of you out
Oh,
there.
thank you.